Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to be exploring a hidden world that you actually interact with every single day. I want you to picture a beautiful, intricate papercraft bridge. On one side of this deep, echoing chasm, you've got a source language, and on the other side, the target language. The chasm right down below? Well, that's an immense cultural gap. So let's look at the hidden complexities of building this bridge. And honestly, I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you're never going to look at translated books, movies, or, heck, even product labels the exact same way again.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the absolute biggest myth we need to dispel right out of the gate is the idea that translation is just this mechanical, one-to-one word swap. It's so tempting to think you can just open up a dictionary, grab the equivalent word, and slap it down like a basic wooden plank on our bridge. But as our papercraft builders quickly discover when they try to cross that chasm, a simple swap almost always leads to a total structural collapse. Words just don't exist in a vacuum, right? They carry all this historical baggage, emotional weight, and cultural context that a dictionary literally just cannot capture. So let's look at exactly what happens when we try to do a simple word swap.
Take the classic English idiom, he looks blue. Now, if a translator just literally swaps those words into, say, Arabic, the audience is reading, he appears the color blue, which, they might think the poor guy is freezing to death, or maybe suffocating. It just creates absolute nonsense. What we actually intended, of course, is he looks sad. This hilarious failure of a literal translation really shows us why our bridge builders need a way more sophisticated toolkit. You can't just move the words, you have to move the actual meaning.
And that brings us to the impossible holy grail of our bridge builders, equivalence. This is literally the central, albeit pretty controversial, concept in translation theory. It's the ultimate goal of achieving a similar effect, meaning, or function over in the target language. The famous linguist Eugene Nida, he distinguished between two types here. You've got formal equivalence, which is all about matching the literal form and content of the message, and then there's dynamic equivalence, which focuses on creating the exact same effect on the new reader that the original text had on the original reader. Sounds amazing in theory, right? But finding true equivalence? Yeah, it's incredibly tricky.
And this brilliantly illustrates that point. Just think about the simple English word uncle. Now in English, it's just one broad concept, right? But if you're translating a story into Arabic, that illusion of perfect equivalence totally shatters. Suddenly you're forced to specify. Do you mean the father's brother, the paternal uncle, or do you mean the mother's brother, the maternal uncle? There literally is no single equivalent word that captures that exact same level of English ambiguity. So our bridge builders are immediately forced to add information that wasn't strictly in the original text. If they don't, they risk building a bridge that just completely misses the other side.
Which brings us to a somewhat sobering reality, captured just perfectly in this quote from translation scholar James Dickens. He straight up states that incomplete replication is a reality of translation. So, in other words, building this bridge always, and I mean always, involves some kind of loss. When you're crossing that linguistic river, a few planks are inevitably going to fall into the water below. Certain cultural features, tricky sound patterns, double meanings, they simply cannot survive the journey. But understanding this reality is absolutely crucial. Why? Because it frees the translator from trying to be this perfect robotic copy machine, and it actually allows them to become a creative problem solver.
Section 1. The Cultural Transposition Scale.
So how do our builders actually construct this bridge in the real world? Well, they use this scale to negotiate those massive cultural gaps. Think of this as the different types of planks our bridge builders get to choose from. Way over on one extreme, we have exoticism. This is where the translator preserves maximum foreignness, maybe keeping a greeting exactly as it sounds in the original language, just to make the reader feel like a true tourist in a totally new culture. Moving along, we get to culk, which is a very literal structural translation. Then there's cultural borrowing, which is importing a word totally verbatim. Think words like fatwa or sushi. Further down the line, we hit communicative translation. And this focuses on completely natural, everyday expressions in the target language. And finally, at the complete opposite extreme, we have cultural transplantation. Let's actually break down how this works in practice.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how vividly it contrasts the calque with a communicative translation, using a really popular Arabic proverb. Look at the calque first, that literal structural translation. We get, it increased the clay moisture. Now, if you read that in the middle of an English novel, you'd be scratching your head. Like, what is this, a gardening book? But if the translator uses a communicative translation, they give us the intended meaning, which is things have gone from bad to worse. They just completely abandon the literal clay and moisture to build a bridge of meaning that the target audience can actually walk across safely.
But what happens when we push all the way to the absolute extreme end of that scale?
Well, that is called cultural transplantation. And this involves the wholesale replacement of source culture details with target culture equivalents. This is basically when the bridge completely blends right into the target land. The translator is actively altering the original setting, the names, the cultural touchstones, all to make the text feel like it was originally written in the reader's own language. It's a super bold move, for sure, and it completely prioritizes the reader's immediate understanding over preserving any of that foreign flavor from the original.
Here's a really beautiful example of cultural transplantation in action. In English, if someone is described as a Romeo, or we call a couple Romeo and Juliet, we instantly recognize that cultural anchor, right? Star-crossed tragic lovers. But what if your target audience has literally never heard of Shakespeare? Well, a bold translator might just completely swap out Shakespeare's iconic lovers for Qais and Lila. They are legendary tragic lovers who are deeply embedded in Arabic literature. So the names change completely, the historical context changes entirely, but that exact same romantic tragic emotion, it is perfectly transplanted right into the mind of the new reader.
Section 2. Adapting metaphors and idioms.
Okay, so we've seen how single words and cultural names are handled. But now, we have to navigate the absolute trickiest part of our papercraft bridge. I'm talking about the treacherous, wind-blown gaps of figurative language. This is where literal translation just goes to die. Take a look at this authentic foreign proverb. The son of the goose is a good swimmer. I mean, it paints a very specific, kind of humorous picture, right? But if a translator just leaves it exactly like that, an English reader might completely miss the point. A dynamic translation totally swaps out those swimming geese for a familiar idiom we all know, like father, like son. Sure, we lose the delightful imagery of the goose, but we successfully transport that core message right across the chasm.
So to handle these metaphors methodically, the linguist Mildred Larson developed this truly fantastic procedural toolkit. When a translator bumps into a metaphor, they basically have 5 distinct choices. First, they can just keep the exact metaphor, if it happens to actually work in the new language. Second, they can replace it entirely with a target language metaphor. Third, they can convert it to a simile, just throw in a like or as to soften it up a bit. Fourth, they can keep the metaphor but just add a brief explanation so the reader isn't lost. Or fifth, they can simply translate the core meaning and ditch the imagery entirely. It's a conscious, active choice that has to be made every single time.
So the crucial point is that finding a functional, relevant equivalent is almost always better than stubbornly sticking to the literal words. Look at the literal translation of this proverb. Birds on their shapes fall together. Honestly, it just feels clunky. But by utilizing step 2 of Larson's toolkit, replacing it with a target language metaphor, we get the incredibly natural birds of a feather flock together. The translator recognized that, hey, both of these cultures observed bird behavior to describe human social habits, and they brilliantly leveraged the target culture's existing poetic phrase to make that bridge totally seamless.
Section 3. The art of negotiation. Let's move to and see how this builds our final understanding. Because as we wrap up our journey across this cultural chasm, it becomes super clear that we really need to redefine what translation actually is. It's definitely not a mechanical process. It's not some mathematical equation. True translation is very often an adaptation. It's a whole set of translative interventions. A text being actively rewritten for a brand new readership, all while desperately trying to maintain that elusive equivalence we talked about earlier. Really, the translator is a negotiator. They're sitting right between the author's original intent and the new reader's cultural expectations, haggling over meaning, emotion, and context until this beautiful, sturdy bridge is finally formed.
And honestly, this leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. There's this concept called the Worfian hypothesis, which basically suggests that the very structure of a language influences the way its speakers conceptualize and perceive the entire world. Think about that for a second. If that's true, if language literally shapes our reality, then what do we inevitably lose or wonderfully gain when we cross that translation bridge? Every single translated work you've ever read is a negotiated reality. It's this complex blend of 2 totally distinct ways of seeing the universe. It's kind of like a minor miracle that we can even understand each other at all across these massive cultural chasms.
If you enjoyed exploring the fascinating mechanics behind how we share ideas all across the globe, make sure you don't miss out on our future explainers. Seriously, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and follow all accounts for the Robo for Education YouTube channel right now. We have so much more to uncover together, using clear slides and focused insights to make really complex topics incredibly simple. Thanks so much for crossing the bridge with me today.